Now, if all you had to do was get a really good sight picture, get that gun aligned perfectly with what you're shooting at, and then pull the trigger smoothly so that you didn't disturb the gun while you were pulling the trigger, if that's all you had to do, shooting a gun would be really easy. What makes it more difficult than that, and what makes it a challenge and a bit of fun, is the fact that the gun recoils. By recoil, what we mean is, since the bullet exits the gun, equal and opposite force, Newton's third law, causes the gun to move in space too. And the way the gun moves, because the force of the bullet is along this line, this vector, which is above the web of your hand, the gun is pushed back and up, and the gun recoils in that manner, in that direction. And when you watch shooters shoot, you will see the gun recoil a little, or if it's a really powerful cartridge, perhaps a lot. Controlling recoil is the challenging thing about shooting, and we need to be able to control it for two reasons. Once the gun is displaced, we need to be able to bring it back into an accurate firing position without displacing it too much. And we need to be able to hold it relatively steady so that it's not displaced before the bullet exits the barrel. Recoil is really nothing to be afraid of. It's not a lot of force, it's very easy to control. It's not going to knock you over. When we get a new shooter, before they even fire a gun, we like to let them know what they're in for. We tell them the recoil is going to feel something like that. For a small caliber gun like a .22, it might not be much more than that. For a very powerful gun like a .44 Magnum, it might be something like that. But it's not a lot of force. It's not something to be afraid of. It's something you can easily control. After we've showed new beginning shooters what to expect by doing that little slap thing that we showed you previously, the next thing we like to have them do is extend an actual gun, a loaded gun, and without trying to fight the recoil a great deal, just let yourself ride the recoil. You have to have a little bit of tension in your arms and your chest and your back, but not a lot. You don't need a death grip. You just need a little bit of tension to hold the gun. And it looks something like this. You say, I'm not going to try to fight this recoil. I'm just going to ride it. As you can see, the gun rides up a little bit, comes back down. I don't have much tension in my upper body muscles at all. And the point of this exercise, the point of taking new shooters through it, is to let them know it's not a lot of force, it's not going to hurt you, you don't need to be afraid of it. When you're just starting to shoot, do that exercise that we just went through. Just lightly control the gun, ride the recoil, and the point of doing that is to get comfortable with the recoil. Get comfortable with the gun, get comfortable with the loud noise. You want to make sure that you're not trying to back away from that gun because you're afraid of the noise or the recoil. You want to make sure that you're leaning into it, as we discussed, in a good proper stance. You're pulling the trigger, the gun is going off, you're riding the recoil, and it's natural and comfortable to you. Once you get comfortable with it, once you're not afraid of it, then it's time to move on to the next level, and that is to try to control the recoil a little bit more. And the way you control the recoil is by, instead of just having a nice, loose, relaxed grip, you start to tighten up the muscles of your arms, your chest, your back, and your shoulders. You start to apply a little bit of tension so that now when you pull the trigger and the gun wants to recoil, it doesn't recoil quite so much. And it would look like this. Here I am just riding the recoil, loose grip, a little bit of tension, and a fair amount of tension. And you can see that as I add tension, the gun jumps less and less. Now, as you start to add tension and try to control the gun from recoiling more and more, sooner or later, you're going to start to do something called flinching. And here's what flinching looks like. You're firing the gun, and because you know the gun is going to recoil up, because that's just the physics of the situation, you're going to start to anticipate that upward motion, and you're going to pull the gun down out of recoil. You don't want to do that, because inevitably what's going to happen is you will wind up shooting the gun like this, and your shots will go low. Your anticipation of the recoil, you're trying to pull it down out of the recoil, is going to disturb the gun, and the shots will go low. So what you want to do is try to control this recoil without pulling the gun down. But the gun wants to go up, you have to keep the gun from going up, so how do you do it without pulling the gun down? The way to think about controlling recoil, and it's a mental thing, is not to think about pulling the gun down out of recoil. I mean, the gun is going to go up, but you don't want to be thinking about pulling it down. What you want to be thinking about is just keeping the gun steady, about not letting the gun be disturbed, not trying to correct the gun's recoil motion. The way you think about that, you think about just keeping that gun right on target. One of the visualizations that we like to use with students that sometimes works is to tell them, don't think about pulling the gun down, think about extending the gun forward. As the gun starts to recoil, you just think about, I'm just going to keep that gun on target by extending the gun towards the target. And that way what you're doing is you're avoiding the excessive motion, the excessive downward motion of trying to pull the gun out of recoil, which will inevitably make your shots go low. Flinching is something that everybody does. Experienced shooters do it unconsciously, and they have to control it. New shooters will often do it consciously because they're afraid of the loud noise and the recoil. No matter what reason you're doing it for, whether it's conscious or unconscious, if you start to see your shots going low and to the left for a right-handed shooter, it's probably because you're flinching. One way to help correct that is go back to the very beginning, start firing the gun, and just let the gun ride, and then gradually increase the tension on your arms, your chest, your shoulders, and your back to try to control that recoil. Now, when we say control the muscles in your arms, we mean the muscles in your forearms too, because the muscles in your forearm articulate your wrist. And what you don't want to have your wrist doing is moving around while you're shooting. In fact, your wrist should stay locked while you're shooting. So you want to control the muscles of your forearm, your upper arm, your shoulders, back, and chest. Gradually increase that tension, and you should be able to bring that recoil under control and avert flinching.